I'm not sure why I'm doing this. I've been sitting here for the better part of an hour, just looking at this thing, this camera, wondering if any of this matters anymore, wondering if it's too late for it to matter. Maybe it is. My name is Harold Mercer. I'm 89 years old. I'll be 90 in March if I get there. The doctors smile when they say things like, if. You learn to hear what's underneath the smile after a while. I'm not recording this because I think I have something important to say. I want to be clear about that right from the start. I'm not a wise man. I'm not someone who figured it out. I'm someone who had a very long time to figure it out and didn't. Not really, not in the ways that would have counted. I'm recording this because the nights have been getting longer, because I wake up at 2 in the morning and I lie there in the dark and I think about things, specific mornings, specific rooms, specific faces. And the weight of all that thinking, it has nowhere to go. My daughter calls on Sundays. She's kind. She listens. But there are things you can't say to your daughter at 89 without frightening her, without making her feel responsible for something that has nothing to do with her, so I'm saying them here. Into this quiet. I grew up in a small town in western Pennsylvania, Donora. Some people know the name because of the smog disaster in 1948. I was 7 years old when that happened. I remember the fog coming in so thick you couldn't see the house across the street. People died, neighbors. A boy from my school named Clifford, though everyone called him Cricket because of the way he laughed. He was 8. He had asthma and the air took him. I remember my mother keeping all the windows closed for days. She'd wet dish towels and lay them along the bottom of the doors. I thought it was almost exciting, the way a child thinks a storm is exciting before he understands what storms can actually do. I didn't understand very much for a very long time. My father worked at the zinc smelting works. Most fathers did. He was a quiet man, not cold, just contained. Like he kept himself in a smaller space than his body actually occupied. I used to watch him at the dinner table and wonder what was going on behind his eyes. I never asked. It didn't occur to me to ask. Children assume they'll have time for everything, that there will come a day later when all the unasked questions finally get asked. That day doesn't always come. He died when I was 34. Heart attack in the driveway coming home from a shift. I got the call at work. I drove to the hospital even though there was no reason to drive to the hospital. There was nothing left to drive to. But I drove there anyway because I didn't know what else to do with my hands. And I remember sitting in the parking lot afterward, just sitting there with the engine running, and realizing that I had never once, not once in 34 years, asked him what his life felt like from the inside. I didn't know what he had wanted to be. I didn't know if he had ever been in love with someone before my mother. I didn't know if he was happy, or if happiness was even a category he used when he thought about his own life. I knew his coffee order, black, no sugar. I knew he liked the Pirates. That was about the shape of it. I met my wife Eleanor in 1958. I was 17 and she was 16, and we were at a dance at the Moose Lodge that neither of us had particularly wanted to attend. She was there because her friend had dragged her. I was there because my friend had dragged me. We spent most of the night standing against the same wall on opposite ends of the room, both of us equally miserable. And at some point I walked over and said something, I don't remember what, probably something embarrassing. And she laughed, not a polite laugh, a real one. I think I decided something in that moment without knowing I was deciding it. We were married 4 years later. June of 1962. She wore her mother's dress altered. We couldn't afford a honeymoon, so we drove to Pittsburgh and stayed at a hotel that I'm sure was not as nice as it seemed to me then. We ordered room service for the first time in either of our lives, and we ate it sitting on the bed watching television and laughing at the sheer extravagance of it. I think about that night more than almost any other night in my life. Not because it was spectacular. because it was completely ordinary and completely ours. And I was entirely present for it, fully there, the way you are sometimes when you're young and you don't yet know how rare that feeling is. We had 2 children, a son, Robert, and then Eleanor. We named her after her mother, which caused all sorts of confusion for years. We called the daughter Ellie to keep things straight. Robert lives in Seattle now. We talk occasionally. It's polite. It's careful. There's a distance there that I put there, though I couldn't have told you at the time that I was building it. It didn't feel like construction. It felt like just living, just being busy, just doing what fathers did, which was to work and to provide and to show up to the important events and call that love. I'm not sure that was love. I think it was the shape of love, the outline of it. But I kept the inside of it mostly to myself, which means I kept it from him, which means he grew up with a father who was physically present and emotionally somewhere else. And children know that. They always know. He knew. I could see it in how he stopped trying, somewhere around age 12 or 13. The way a kid stops bringing you things when he's learned that you'll receive them without really receiving them. He stopped telling me about his day. He stopped asking me to come watch him play baseball. And I told myself he'd gotten too old for that. Kids that age don't want their parents around, but that wasn't it. He'd just already made his peace with what I was willing to give. I understand that now. I wish understanding it now counted for more than it does. The years between 30 and 60 are strange to think about now. They felt so full at the time, so genuinely full. There was always something happening, something needing to be done, somewhere that needed me to be there. I worked in insurance for most of my career. Adjustments, then management, then regional oversight. It wasn't a glamorous life, but it was a solid one, and I told myself I genuinely believed that I was building something, that all the late evenings and the skipped dinners and the vacations that got shortened or canceled were deposits into something, some account that would eventually pay out in the form of a good life. I don't know what I thought that good life would look like. I'm not sure I ever stopped to think about it clearly, which is maybe the whole problem. I was so committed to building towards something that I never asked what the something was. I just kept moving. Movement felt like purpose. As long as I was doing, I didn't have to ask whether what I was doing was pointed at anything real. Eleanor asked me once, this was maybe 1987, so I would have been in my mid-40s. She asked me if I was happy. We were driving back from somewhere, I can't remember where, and it was late and the kids were asleep in the back seat, and out of nowhere she asked. I said yes, without thinking, immediately, yes. She didn't say anything for a while. Then she said quietly, almost to the window, I don't think you'd know if you weren't. I didn't answer that. I turned on the radio. I've thought about that moment 1,000 times. What she was trying to reach. What she was hoping I might say if she gave me enough space to say it. And I turned on the radio. That was me. That was the shape of me for most of my life. Someone handed me an open door, and I looked at it, and I turned on the radio. Eleanor got sick in 2009. Pancreatic cancer. From the diagnosis to the end was 11 months. I'm not going to say a great deal about that time, not because it doesn't deserve to be said, but because I don't know how to say it without it becoming something else, something that belongs to her and not to me to give away. What I'll say is this. Those 11 months were the most honest I had ever been with her, the most honest I had ever been, full stop. Something about the specificity of the time, the knowing of it, the actual counting of it, made pretense feel stupid, made the careful distance I'd always kept feel not just sad, but wasteful, criminal almost. I told her things I should have said in 1973, in 1985, in 1994, things that would have cost me nothing and meant everything. She received them. She was generous about it. She didn't make me feel the weight of the lateness, even though we both understood it. That was who she was. always more interested in the thing itself than in the question of whether it had arrived on time. I held her hand at the end. We listened to the radio, the good kind, the kind you choose, not the kind you turn on to fill silence. And I stayed as present as I have ever been in my entire life. And then she was gone, and the house was just a house. I kept working for 2 more years after that, didn't know what else to do with the hours. Then I retired, and for a while I didn't know what to do with those either. I moved to a smaller place, one of those communities, you know the kind, where everyone is more or less my age, and we are all, in our various polite ways, waiting. There's a woman named Gloria who plays piano in the common room on Tuesday afternoons. There's a man named Samuel who grows tomatoes in a little plot out back, even though he can barely walk to it anymore. He brings them in and leaves them on a table by the entrance and doesn't tell anyone they're from him, but everyone knows. I like Samuel. I've never told him that. There's something about this age, and maybe this is what I most want to say, though I've been circling it for a while. There's something about being 89 that makes you see the full shape of a life in a way you genuinely cannot see it while you're in the middle of living it, like you've been inside a painting for decades and suddenly you've stepped back far enough to see the whole canvas. And what I see when I look at mine is not a wasted life. I want to be careful about that. I had love. I had more than a great many people are given. I had Eleanor for 47 years. I had children who turned out to be decent people. I had mornings that I can still feel on my skin. But there is so much I was present for that I wasn't present for. Does that make sense? I was in the room, but I wasn't in the room. I was eating dinner, but I was composing my response to an email I hadn't yet written. I was at my son's graduation, but I was thinking about the drive home. I was lying next to my wife in the dark, and I was somewhere else entirely, some low-level problem, some worry about something that I can't now remember, that certainly didn't deserve to be where I put it, which was right between me and the person I loved most in the world. I spent 50 years standing slightly to the left of my own life, and I don't know how to account for that. I don't have a reason for it that feels satisfying. I was afraid, maybe, of what it would mean to be fully in something, of what you risk when you're truly there, truly inside it, because then you can truly lose it. Maybe, I'm not sure that's entirely it. Maybe I just didn't know it was a choice. Maybe no one told me it was something you had to decide to do. That presence was not automatic, that you had to choose it again and again in small rooms, at ordinary tables, in cars late at night with children sleeping in the back seat and someone you loved asking you a question they'd been working up to for a long time. Robert called last month. He called on a Wednesday, which surprised me because it's usually Sunday if he calls. He just called on a Wednesday out of nowhere and asked how I was doing, and we talked for almost an hour. Not about anything important, just things. Just the ordinary back and forth of two people trying to find their way back to each other across a long distance. He told me about a hike he'd done. He told me his daughter had started playing violin and that she was, by his cheerful admission, not very good yet. I laughed, and then I felt it. And the laugh, I felt it in my body. The way you feel something that costs you something and gives you something at the same time. I asked him if he was happy. There was a pause, a real one. And then he said, "I think so, Dad." "Yeah, I think I mostly am." I said, "Good." I wanted to say more than that. I had more than that inside me. But I said good, and then we talked about his daughter's violin for a while, and then we said goodbye. It was something, though. It was more than I would have been capable of 10 years ago. Maybe that's how it works. Maybe this is what 89 is for. The slow permission to finally say the smaller version of what you actually mean. I have a photograph on the dresser. It's from sometime in the late 70s, I think 77 or 78. We're all at the beach. Eleanor and me and Robert, who's maybe 15 or 16, and Ellie, who's a few years younger, and we're all squinting into the sun, and Eleanor is laughing at something, and her hair is blowing across her face, and she doesn't know the picture is being taken. I don't know who took it. Someone on the beach. A stranger. I look at that photograph, and what I feel isn't simple. It's not just warmth, not just loss. It's something more complicated. It's the full knowledge that the people in that photograph had no idea what they had. Couldn't see it. We're too much inside it to see the edges of it, which is exactly as it should be. You can't live at the height of your awareness of your own life every single moment. You'd never survive it. But I think there's a kind of attention, and a quiet kind, a modest kind, that doesn't ask that much of you, that doesn't require you to be in a state of constant gratitude or wonder, just present, just here, just turning toward the person in the room instead of away from them, just letting the moment land before you move to the next one. I didn't do that enough. That is the true sentence of my life. Not that I failed dramatically, not that I made terrible choices or was a bad man, just that I was not quite there, not quite all the way there, for most of it, and I can't go back and be there now. Ellie visited in October. She lives closer, 3 hours, and she comes when she can. She brought soup because she knows I don't cook much anymore, and we sat at the kitchen table and she held my hands at some point, just held them, not because anything sad was being said, just because she did, just because she's that kind of person. She got that from her mother. I told her that while she was there. I said, "You got that from your mother." And she smiled, said she'd take it. I looked at her and I thought, here is a person I helped make, who is whole and kind and capable of sitting quietly with someone she loves. That happened. That's real. That goes on the other side of the ledger. I have more on the other side than I sometimes let myself remember at 2 a.m. I'm tired today. Not sick tired, just old tired. The kind that lives in the bones. I want to finish this because I'm not sure how many good recording days I have left, and I've said most of what I came here to say. I suppose what I want to leave here, not as advice, I'm not qualified to give advice, I've made that clear, but just as a record of what it feels like from here, from the far end of a long road. It feels like most of it went by while I was thinking about something else. It feels like the moments I remember most clearly, the ones that still have weight and warmth in them, were the ones when I wasn't trying to be anywhere other than where I was. A kitchen in 1962 with room service getting cold. A hospital room in 2009 with a radio playing low. A phone call on a Wednesday in October with my son talking about his daughter and a violin she's just beginning to learn. Small things, completely ordinary things, but I was there for them, actually there. And that, I think, is the only thing I know for certain now, that the being there was the thing, the whole thing. And I wish I had known it when I had more time to spend being there, to spend being here. I'm here now. It's quiet, and I'm here. If you've stayed with me through all of this, I don't know what you came here looking for. Maybe something I didn't give you. Maybe you already know all of this in your own way, from your own long road. But if something here settled somewhere in you, just sit with it a while. You don't have to do anything with it. Just sit with it. That's all.